Go ahead.
It's going to be recorded.
Oh, yeah, we're live.
Okay. Ener, meaner, moaner, mac, basiliner, boner, strike, quo, quack. Quo, quack. Alice, Lou, Dixie, Slum, Huckus, Puckus, Peters, Gum, Francis.
That's the Olive National Anthem.
My dad and all his brothers and sisters knew it, and I guess all my cousins were told that, and nobody knows where it comes from.
Yeah. So just as a child,
It's a
you
Watkins.
just been hearing it ever since?
Yeah, and everybody's dead, all Daddy's brothers and sisters could say it just that fast.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought of it in so long, I don't know if I left part of it out, I don't know. And if my cousins hear this, I hope it brings back a good memory.
Is that him?
That's him.
That's your grandfather?
That's my grandfather.
We've got a picture on the screen here we're looking at.
And that's the youngest picture I have of him. So I'm going to guess that to be about 1900. He was born 1883. He was the youngest of the first set of kids. And then that's him, 1955, golden wedding anniversary, him and my grandmother. A lot of change.
Okay. So that's
all the kids.
Okay.
The oldest is to the right, and my dad's the youngest. He's the one in the front, the youngest.
So the Benny is back on. Benny Watkins.
Made it back.
Give everybody, how old are you, Benny?
I'll be 72, about 2 weeks, the 19th.
Oh, happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
Happy birthday, yeah. How do you like the new room we're in here at Hyperactive Audio?
The new room?
The new room we're in.
Oh, I feel like I'm
We were in here briefly.
Hollywood or Nashville or something.
We were in here briefly last time for a little music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
enjoyed it.
Benny wanted to come back on. This is Benny 2.0 and tell some, what you call them, grandfather stories or granddaddy stories?
Yeah, stories my granddad told me, like now when, again, I was 17 when he died, and
And what year was that?
67.
67.
And all my cousins have told me since he died that we'd be together, and occasionally, maybe annually get together. And I'd tell a few stories, and they'd say, would you record them someday? And I'd say, yeah, I will someday. And they'd say, you always sat in the swing with Granddad and listened to the stories, and we did something else, and now we wish we had listened to them.
Yeah.
So I want to let my cousins all know when this gets out where they can find it.
Well, absolutely.
And I hope they really enjoy it.
Can you give a little background on your grandfather before you tell any stories? Like where are you from and where he lived?
His dad's name was John Henry Watkins, and he was the oldest of 8 boys. And he was born in Christian County, and then they moved to Trigg, and then his father and those 8 boys moved, if they were all alive, moved to Wadesboro. It was Hardin, but Hardin didn't exist. They moved there in 1859. And Hardin didn't become incorporated, didn't become a community until 1893. And so Granddad always said he was from Wadesboro,
Mm-hmm.
And he was born in 1883. And I don't know why I'm looking at that. I need to look at y'all. But his parents, his mother died when he was about 16 months old, I think. And his dad remarried and had some more kids, and they lived between Wadesboro Road between old 641, new 641, that strip. They had 250 acres there, and she died in 1899. So I guess they sold the property, and one of the boys, Silas, lived at Olive, and so my great grandfather John went to Olive. And my granddaddy lived with his uncle, who in those days when a man died and he had kids, if he had brothers that wasn't married, you was supposed to marry your brother's widow and raise his kids. That was customary.
Uh-huh.
And so he had a brother that did that. So he lived with them some, and he lived with one of his brothers, Uncle Bob, some. And he got a job for a farmer, lived with a farmer at Olive, and married his daughter. And they stayed at Olive, and she was a fieldback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that only if the brother is not married?
Yeah.
Only not.
Yeah, you wasn't supposed to have a divorce, and
Well, yeah.
yeah, it was. And, and I think that's I think you see that in the Bible.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where that came
Probably.
from, and you probably heard that.
I've read it in the Bible. Yeah.
But his dad, John Henry, he married a girl, Mary Ragsdale, from Wadesboro, and they married in 1861. So he would have been 22, and that's when the Civil War started, and he didn't fight in the Civil War. He did have a brother that joined the Union Army in March of 64, which the war was nearly over, and he was stationed at Paducah and was killed during General Forrest's raid on Paducah, and so he's buried there on the little plot there on the Wedgeboro Road at Hardin. But he was a hard-working man, and he saw I'm sure Western Kentucky was very secluded as far as up-to-date modern stuff going on, and he saw huge changes. He was still alive when they put the man on the moon.
Yeah.
And, I've heard him talk about cutting wheat with a cradle. And I'll tell the stories of, there were some things that he never had heard about until he saw them. And it scared him.
Yeah.
So these are your stories that you and your granddad were sitting on the swing that you remember hearing.
Yeah, and then some of them, there's some of these stories that I've heard my dad tell.
Yeah.
That my granddad told him.
Right. Well, take her away, Benny.
Yeah, we're ready.
Well, I don't. There's no way to do a chronological order through. Since we've talked about doing this, I've just
Yeah.
I'll add one, and I'll just start at the top.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, the railroad came through Hardin in 1893 is when they finished it, and they had the stock laws. In those days, you didn't fence animals in, you fenced your crops in, and your houses and your gardens in. So they fenced the railroad coming through Hardin, and they had gates on it. And certain time of day, the train schedule, they needed people to go open gates to let the train through and then close them. So he was 10 years old, born in 1883. He 10 cents a day to open the gates. And he'd never seen a train. And so he went down there early to be there to open the first one. And he heard that whistle blowing, and it got his heart pounding. And he saw that black smoke. And he said, and then it come around a bend, and I don't remember a bend coming from Dexter. But he said it was a flat car with a boiler on it. It wasn't a locomotive like we know. And he said, there was that engineer up there, and he had a big, long beard, and he had a big bee-gum hat, which he called it a bee-gum. Now they call it a beehive. Mm-hmm. Very popular in 1800s. Mm-hmm. And it scared him to death, and he just took off running home. And he come through there and tore all them gates down, and he lost his job the first day.
He didn't get the gate.
But while I'm on that, this had to be at the same time. This was a separate story, but the first time the train came into Hardin and stopped, it had to be the same day. Mary Jo Myers' grandfather, and that, Dylan, Keeling, and Kayla, that would be their great-grandfather. He was the depot agent at Hardin. And by the way they named it, that they put a depot when a main highway crossed the railroad, and whoever they bought the land for the depot, they named the depot after that person, and they bought it from Hardin Irvin. And I always wondered if they'd have bought across the road, it might have been Watkins.
That's true.
But anyway, they brought the train in. It stopped. Everybody at Hardin was out there to see it, and families, and so Captain Alexander Fulton was his name, Mary Jo's grandfather, and he cut up, messed with everybody all the time. I can't imagine anybody would want to act that way. But they got ready to leave, and he said, "Now everybody's got to back up. We got to turn this thing around." And he said it scared everybody. Kids was crying, and women was running and whipping horses and trying to get cleared out. You know, and of course you can't turn a train around, but they didn't know it. Then he had a uncle named Ben Watkins, and he was a painter, and he got lead poison, and they had to amputate his leg. And
Oof.
I don't know how old Grandad was, but he held the kerosene lamp while the doctor amputated his leg.
That doesn't sound fun.
No.
He held it while his own leg was getting injured?
No.
Okay,
My
okay.
grandfather, Will, held it while they cut Ben's leg off.
Oh, okay.
And so, you know,
Was this a hold the lamp but look away
well,
situation?
you know, you'd get tough back in them days. You couldn't live. We live a pretty sheltered life as far as that goes. But those people, you know, every family lost 2 or 3 kids died when his kids. Every woman lost husbands. It was just a rough life, and you had to be mentally tough
Yeah.
to survive it. So that was. He toughened up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I don't know what year that was. But at one time, he was living with his brother, Uncle Bob. And by the way, these kids were half brothers and sisters. Uncle Bob's name was James Robert. And then when the second set of kids, they had one, they named him James. But they called James Robert Uncle Bob,
Right.
and the other one Uncle Jim, so there was never any confusion. It was kind of like Larry, Darrell, and my other brother, Larry. But anyway, Uncle Bob had a muzzle-loading shotgun, which was probably a smoothbore rifle. Everybody used them like shotguns. And the proper way to load one is you put your powder and your shot in, and you push it down, and then you put your half cap on, pull it to half cock. You've got half cock and full cock, and half cock's your safety. And you put your cap on, and then you let your hammer down. Well, for some reason, Uncle Bob put his cap on first, and his half cock didn't hold. And when he rammed it, it jarred it, and it went off and tore his hand all to pieces.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow.
And so Grandad held the lamp with that amputation.
Oh.
And that took place, if you come from Hardin, there's some S curves. I think there's 3 S curves coming from Hardin to Olive, I believe. And it would be in the center S curve. There was an old house there when I was a kid, old barnwood house, real old. And that's where that took place. So the doctor at Hardin, he helped the doctor at Hardin do it. And Brady put his hand in a cigar box and took it out in the garden and buried it. And nobody knew of this back then, and it's just something that people learned in the last few years. The phantom pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he took the hand off, and it was still gripping the ramrod.
Yeah.
So Uncle Bob just couldn't sleep. He said, my hand's cramping. He said, Will, go out there and dig that hand up and straighten my fingers out. And he went out there and dug that up, straightened his fingers out, and he come in and he was asleep.
Really?
Oh,
I
man.
And poor old Granddad,
Never heard of that before.
He
I've never
died
heard that.
before the theory of phantom pain came out, and we hear about it all the time.
I've heard of phantom pains. I've never heard anybody digging the hand back up and straightening the fingers back out.
But Uncle Bob I remember him, and he wore a sock.
Yeah.
And he had an old Studebaker car, straight shift, and he could bump it. He'd drive this end, bump it, gear shift around. Sweet old man. Sweet old man.
So that was 2 amputations.
Yeah.
He was assisted in
Yeah.
with a lantern. I wonder if it was like when we were growing up, you hold a flashlight where I can see it.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'm picturing the ferryman coming across on the flat ferry, and he's just holding the lantern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
the figure that takes the boat across to Hades in the Odyssey. Just holding
Yeah. 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 Whew. So that my generation, which I'm a generation ahead of you guys, but my generation is a bunch of candy butts compared to the way.
Well, you think we are?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to be nice.
It's just a bag of sugar.
Not say that. But
Well, that was
people had a hard.
2 people ago. What? Your 3 people ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I always, when I was a kid, I was interested in history and stuff, and I liked to hear the stories and hear them talk. And I guess their accents were more influential on me than the accents of the people I went to school with.
Yeah.
So I've got more of an accent like those people had than I do. Our accents are not even close,
No.
And so I guess that rubbed off on me. I spent a lot of time with them, and I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother on Mama's side and my grandmother, and they had very thick Marsh County accents. And my granddaddy, it might be interesting, we call them quail. He called them partridges.
Partridges.
I guess people around here call them partridges.
Partridges.
And I guess that's the same thing, is it?
I have no idea.
But he called them partridges.
I have no idea. What's a Marshall County accent?
Well,
I've heard you talk about that before.
We need new ball uniforms.
yeah, but but when I was a kid, there was a different accent around Hardin, different accent around Olive. Fair Dealing had different accents. Now there's no
So
different.
I've got this site pulled up here, and it's a family tree searcher. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna get whenever it loads, I'm gonna get the spelling from you, and I'm gonna punch it in and see what comes up on your granddad.
And
His name, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Cole, you can take over the screen too.
yeah, I will.
Well, it's William Henry Watkins.
Henry Watkins.
And his daddy was John Henry.
Okay, I'm gonna search while you keep talking.
Okay.
And this is all taking place in the Olive Hardin area, right?
Yeah.
So far.
Okay, I've got railroad amputations and I've got Cap Fulton. Okay. 1898, Spanish-American War broke out, so Granddad was 16. No, 1899. So he'd been 6. I can't even figure. If he was born in 83, he would have been 16, yeah. So him and another boy he knew decided to run away and join the Army. And Granddad was too young, but you can see in that picture, he looked a lot, he was probably 16, 17 years old in that picture there. But he looked older than that. So he figured he could get by until he was 18, 19, and join. So they got to Murray, and the other boy got in a fight and cut somebody. And Granddad thought, I'm going to end up, they're going to be looking for him, and I'm going to be with him, and I'll be in trouble too. So he went back home.
Went back.
So he missed the Spanish-American War. And then none of his brothers were in the Spanish-American
I looked a little more baby face at 16 than that.
You think he was 16 in that first picture we showed?
If it was taken in 1900, he would have been 17. And the reason I'm thinking that, there's a picture of him, and you can tell he's older, and it was a picture that he got took with my grandmother's sister, trying to make my grandmother jealous. Before they married, he was wanting to court her, and she wasn't paying any attention to him, so he kind of started paying attention to her sister.
Some things
Rattle
never
'em.
change.
And so they got
Rattle 'em.
yeah, some things never change. So anyway,
Stay toxic, kings.
you can tell he's several years older. And so him and Granny married in 1905, so he would have been like 22. So you can tell he's younger. So I'm going to guess that to be around 1900. You know.
Grandma tells a story about my granddad. He was trying to court her, and I think he threw a bunch of fireworks or bottle rockets in the driveway. So you're right. I don't think it ever changes.
Yeah.
Stay toxic, huh?
Stay toxic kings.
Yeah. Look what happened.
That's
How
pretty
that
funny.
scrambled up some way. I don't know what happened.
Must have been touching on it.
I must have been touching on it.
So
But it
wait.
don't matter if I lose that after tonight anyway. Okay, another. Well, I'm about to run out. This is not going to be a
That's
long
okay.
podcast.
That's okay. I'm looking here. 1883 he was born, you said, right?
Yeah, November, I think.
Okay.
And he didn't have a birth certificate. I found a birth certificate a few years ago that was.
This uses census data, actually, I think.
Yeah. That was. I guess he was already grown. I don't remember the date on it, and I don't know where I got it, and I don't know where it is. But it was somebody that witnessed his birth and signed that this was correct. That was his name and who his parents were. So I guess they didn't put a lot of importance into making a birth certificate as soon as a baby was born, and there's probably been a lot of people never had
Well,
one.
that was before Social Security.
Yes, that might have been. Well,
That's when we all got our numbers when Social Security came along. I can't remember when that came along.
30s.
The 30s?
Yeah, but see, he had already been old, and I doubt if the woman who signed it would have still been alive at the time. But I don't know that.
What's your
I don't
dad's
know.
name?
My dad, William Wilson Watkins.
So we're still in Olive and all this.
Yeah. Okay, what was I looking at? First car. Yeah. He had never heard of a car, and they were cutting wheat somewhere, and they heard this racket. And what in the world is that? And so somebody in the bunch said, I bet it's a car, an automobile. And what's that? Well, somebody explained it, and here come a car down the road, and rattling and making a lot of noise. And he said it just kind of scared him.
On an old dirt road, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he...
Could you imagine the first time you saw a car? Never seen one before.
Yeah. And the train, see, that was the
Devil.
first train he ever saw. In the other
Yeah.
store, first train. And then another time when they was cutting wheat, and by the way, they cut wheat with a cradle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Cradle?
Yeah.
They cut wheat with a cradle. And they heard another racket. What's that? Well, we don't know what that is. And here comes something flying over, and it was an airplane. And somebody in the bunch had heard of that, and they all figured out, well, that's an airplane. Grandad said, scare you to death.
I'm sure if you've never
Well,
seen
yeah,
it.
you never, yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah.
I'm sure you just stared at it the whole time,
Yeah,
wondering,
just like when first time I saw a chainsaw. I'm just scare you to death.
you know.
What's that noise?
In his lifetime, he saw the first locomotive. His first locomotive, the first probably automobile drive through Olive, and probably the first some kind of airplane fly over Olive, all in his lifetime.
Yeah, and he died. He died like December 26, 7, something like that. A day or two after Christmas of 1967, and I think that the man on the moon was before that, wasn't it?
Let's see, Kennedy was shot in 63. His brother was shot in 68. And the moon landing was, let's see.
We could look it up real quick,
Yeah.
but I'm too slow. But he saw a lot of progress.
So, when was your
69.
dad born?
1924.
24. Okay.
It says July 20th, 1969.
Okay, so he didn't. That was after he died. Yeah. But he would have saw the space program.
Oh, for sure. He would have saw I guess the moon race, or,
Yeah, he would have. I know I was like fifth, sixth grade or something when the first flight, Alan Shepard flight,
Right.
and then the first man in orbit, John Glenn. I was in upper grades, I guess. And he may not have.
You're moving a little faster. Let me try yours.
He may not have paid any attention to that. They had a little bitty wood TV, a little bitty screen in it. And I don't know how much TV he watched. I don't know if he watched the news, you know.
When did he have a TV? I
Well,
want to say if he had
Before he died,
right.
because I remember spending the night, and I was used to sitting up and watching TV till 10 o'clock or so, and they went to bed about 8.
With the sun, I'm sure.
And got up about 4, you know, and I wasn't ready to go to bed, but I did.
What,
But they had a little old bitty TV.
was it just like NBC? Probably
Well-
went off at 10 o'clock or midnight.
Yeah. When we first got a TV, the only station you could get was Nashville, and then they built a little bit later on, they built WPSD in Paducah, and then they built one at Harrisburg, Illinois. So when I first remember having a TV, you couldn't watch anything but WLAC in Nashville, and you wasn't going to get to watch but about half what was on there anyway. The reception was so bad it just fuzz up, buzz, and you couldn't hear and you couldn't see, and you'd have to run out. Somebody'd have to go outside. You'd have to raise the window, and somebody'd go outside, turn the antenna, and while the people in the house, no, turn it back the other way. It was better. No, well, that's as good as you can get. Come on back in, you know. So you couldn't half watch the show.
Had to pop in the signal.
Yeah, you'd stick them in the ground about close to a window,
Yeah.
and you'd leave it loose where you could turn it because you're just going to have to adjust it every day.
I remember those. Probably not those, but antennas
Yeah.
for sure. You got another one, Benny?
Oh, yeah, I've got some more, but I keep getting not what I'm wanting to get here. Oh, yeah. He told me the story years ago, and then in the last few years, I figured out who the guy was. This was a story about a man in around he was a great big man, so they called him Tank.
That's a good name to
Good
have.
man, yeah. And his name was Tank Lovett. And I've learned Justin Lamb would be a descendant of him, and the Lovett attorneys in Benton. There's not any left, I don't think, but they're all descendants. But his name was George Lovett.
Oh, Tank Lovett.
Yep, Uncle Tank.
Uncle Tank Lovett.
So he would have been much older than my granddad, I guess, or they wouldn't have called him Uncle Tank. But anyway, I think the story was that he lived at Birmingham, and you know where Birmingham.
Yes.
It's in the lake now.
Yeah.
And he was at Olive with relatives and had a stroke. And they needed to get him back to Birmingham. And so they hired Grandad and some other boy to take him back. So they built him a stretcher and packed him from Olive to Birmingham.
Packed him.
Packed him.
Back then. What road was there back then?
Well, I'm guessing that they went from Olive to Fair Dealing. You know where that road is?
I know where fair dealing is.
Yeah, yeah.
Is the dealing fair?
And by the way, back before that was originally called Rough Creek.
Fair dealing was called Rough Creek.
Yeah.
All right, I think we found Mr. William Henry Watkins.
What do we got on this sucker?
All right, let me zoom it in. Let me figure out how to zoom it in.
Tell us what we got pulled up here.
All right, so this
'Cause
show.
I can't
so
read it.
Etta Philbeck was his wife, right?
That's correct.
All right. So we've got Mr. William here, and then his children, and then his parents. And it goes back further.
Yeah.
So
I can go back to 1508.
all right, let's just follow the Watkins line, see where it takes. Okay, it's the Watkins name stops at Jesse Watkins in 1745.
Damn.
So if you've got that information, you could add on to this and it'll
Does it
fill it in.
It won't go any further?
Not on the Watkins side, but it'll keep going on this other.
Okay. Did you know that, Benny? Jesse?
I've got another that a guy gave me, and it's a different. Okay, I can give you some names. See, I can't see that far. Does it have His father is John Henry, and his mother is Mary Ragsdale.
Yep.
Okay.
I got it a little bit bigger. Is that
Okay.
still too fuzzy?
No,
Okay.
I'll just let y'all.
Yeah, I got John
interpret.
Henry. His
Okay.
father is Samuel T. Watkins.
Samuel T. and
then John
Sarah
Watkins.
Dillon Hawkins.
Yep, Sarah
Okay.
Dillon.
Then there was a John Watkins and Elizabeth Wade.
Yep. And
And
then
then
Jesse
there-
Watkins.
See, I don't know about.
And then
the-
Patience Jernigan.
That's a cool name, Patience.
I don't know about the Jesse Watkins. I believe. I'm not trying to be argumentative about anything, but I believe Jesse Watkins to be the brother of Samuel T.
Does it
I
say?
think the next Watkins.
So
back,
it'll tell me their children here. So it says Samuel. It says he's got 2 other brothers.
there was a Hezekiah and a Jesse and a William.
Okay, I see William.
think-
I see Hezekiah, but I don't see William or Jesse.
Unless they name.
But I think it ran from John Watkins that was born about 17, that was married to Elizabeth Wade. I think his father's name was also John.
Can you go back over to where it started at?
Yeah.
Patience? No, the other way.
Oh yeah.
Does that say North Carolina?
They came from North Carolina.
Birdie, North Carolina.
Which one you want to look at?
Right there, Jesse Watkins, married.
Oh yeah, Birdie, North Carolina is what it says. It looks like it's typed in because it's not.
But the information I have says that Jesse Watkins was Samuel's brother, not grandfather.
Okay, well,
And I've heard of the Patience Watkins. I'm pretty sure that that's correct, that they were married. But I think that's, and that bunch of Watkins stayed in Trigg County.
And it's not foolproof. So that
Yeah.
could,
Right,
it could be
right.
it could someone
And
could have
the-
put that in. And
Yeah,
just
the
mixed
guy
it
that
up.
gave me the information I have that went back to 1508, we don't know that that's correct.
Right.
But they were born in, there was 2 places the Watkins lived that's supposedly documented in Mamoushire, Wales, and Glamorgan, Wales. And I talked to somebody from Glamorgan one time, and they said lots of Watkins, but I found that Watkins in Wales is like Joneses and Smiths. They said the biggest part of the people over there are Williams and Watkins.
I see Silas here.
Yeah, Silas was my great-grandfather's brother.
Yep, he's right there.
there's William.
So let's see here. So William Wilson's your dad.
Yeah.
So this doesn't go as recently as like 75 years. So it has to.
Good. Well, the family was the oldest sibling of my dad's was Paul, and he was born about 1906 or something like that. And then there was Willard, Bubba's granddaddy,
Uh-huh.
and then there was one named Headley, and
Yep.
he died as a baby, a 3-year-old. And then there was
Yep.
Pat, and there was Kinsey,
Just going in line.
and Elizabeth, Agnes, and Daddy.
That's right.
Is it?
You said it just in line, and then when you said 3 years old, it has and it's actually got Sarah's picture.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So I can't remember when I went to the bathroom last, but I can remember long term.
yeah. I mean, that was
I
just
just
perfectly in
about
order.
can't hardly make it anymore with my short term memory, but I can tell you stuff like that.
Did you say you wanted me to punch another name in?
No.
Okay. Well, it's cool to see it.
Yeah. Proud of it. Proud of it. Good. They were good
There's
people,
a fun-
hard working people.
There's a fun game I like to play on this website, and it's just click back as far as you can possibly click back, and let's just see who you're linked to. How about you want to play that game?
Let's play it.
Yeah.
I usually start just at the top and go down, so I'm going to follow John Jerrigan, who is Patience's grandfather,
That's a cool name.
according to
Patience.
this. According to this.
Yeah.
All right, so let's follow the Jerrigans. All right, we're back in 1530. All right, it stops there.
I think the one I've got says Thomas Watkins, and he was born there in Wales in 1508. And they
Okay.
came to the U.S. and the John Watkins you're seeing, his dad was born on the Isle of Wight, and I think that's in Virginia. Isn't it an island? Do you know, Chase?
Chase
You ever heard of the Isle of Wight?
I have not.
I think that's off the Virginia coast.
I've never heard that.
And the name came from, there was a man named Watt.
What?
Isn't what? What? And so his children they call Watt and Wales, evidently. His children they would call Watt's kin.
And that's how it came about.
Yeah. And see, if you think about it, you've got several names that we hear now. Hawkins, Watkins, Lampkins, Atkins.
Uh-huh.
And then we kind of learned a little bit about it when we went overseas. You know, in Ireland, they put O'Toole, O'Connor, MacGregor,
Yeah.
whatever. And I think they use Mac on the front to say the children of the children of Toole, the children of Donald.
I remember that conversation.
And then in Scotland, I think they use Mac.
Yes.
And then it appears maybe in England they use son,
Right.
Thompson, Johnson, Jackson.
Right.
So that's how that came about. And there's a coat of arms, Watkins coat of arms.
According to this, the Philbeck spelling has changed two or
Yes.
three times.
It was.
It's
Go ahead.
yeah. So Philbeck with an F, but then before that it was Philbeck with a PH,
P.
and then a couple generations of that it was Wilhelm Ernest Felbach. Philbach.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I've seen it spelled as Philbrick.
It's
Yeah, Wilhelm Ernest Philbrick, whatever you want to call it. Is it Wiesbaden, Germany?
it's
It's where he was born.
it looks like
and he
it's,
came to the U.S. and he came to Philadelphia. And then they went down into the Carolinas. Most all your
back over here.
native West Kentucky people came from North Carolina. They bought land here because it was very suitable for tobacco. And the tobacco farmers in the Carolinas sold their farms and came here and bought more land cheaper to raise tobacco because it was just perfect tobacco country.
I know
Dark
I've got
farm.
North Carolina, and
Yeah, just
you can
about.
track it back there.
About anybody native you talk to in West Kentucky, any county, same situation.
Oh yeah, here we go. A bunch of pictures and a bunch of sirs.
There's no way they got a picture of somebody who was born in
They're like
1478.
paintings and family crests. All right, so
Is that Philbeck stuff?
no, this is branched off. I'll trace it back once we get to the end here.
Where
if
we
we
at?
find anything cool.
1400, 1380.
Okay, this is where it gets fun.
See, I've never even tried to go too far back because it's just mind-boggling.
1381.
Mind-boggling.
You'll be surprised. You're gonna find your link to a few kings.
Well, my mother.
I'm calling it right now because
Hey, my mother is the 22nd great-granddaughter of Robert the Bruce, first king of Scotland.
see,
That's pretty cool.
Brittany's got family linked to all the Bruces up to the fourth one, and then a coworker of mine also was linked to the first Bruce, and accounting for the possibility of mistakes, I think I do. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people, I'm finding the more I do this,
Yeah.
if I try to stay in the names that are English, or at least a
Yeah.
little Anglo, there's a lot of depending on how accurate it is, a lot of people tie into the DeBruces. And you're the first person I've talked to that You're the first person I've talked to that knew who the DeBruces are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bunch of Marshall County people
Yeah.
around Fair Dealing are related to my mother, and they're also. And see, from what I understand, Robert the Bruce and William Wallace, and you know who William Wallace was.
The name sounds familiar.
Braveheart, the movie.
Oh yeah.
They were second cousins. And it was on the same side of the family that me and you would be on, so he would be my 23rd second cousin.
So we're at the year 1140.
At this point, it's just choose your adventure here, which line you go down. I'm trying to stick with the
1105.
most Anglo names, just for the
We're getting off Frenchy.
possibly linking up. So the DeBruces are kind of in this range.
Give me a date.
So
1010.
we're in France right now. We're in your France heritage. Hugh the First, Count of Clermont. This gets fun. Okay,
I
so-
thought I kind of felt a little Frenchy.
Felt a little fancy tonight.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What
Oh, I'll
else?
tell you something cool. You know Billy Gibson and Wendy? He's used to be a plumbing contractor.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wendy's
yes.
an optometrist.
Yes.
Okay, she's got they live on Bryant Road out there. Beautiful place out there. And they're, where you go up, there's steps. She put her genealogy, it's handwritten on the wall with that, they call it calligraphy, the fancy.
Yeah.
She got somebody to do that, and that wall, it's probably that size of this wall, and it's just full of it, and it goes back to, what's that person's name in France? I can't think. A real famous person. But that would be cool to have
Yeah, that would
have
be
that
awesome.
fixed in your house that way. She's proud of it, and it's just cool. That writing is just beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to steal that before we leave.
Handwriting isn't what it used to be. That's for
No,
sure.
I can't write anything but my name. I print everything else. I can't.
William Du Bois, Count of Sully. Theobald III. See, we're getting there.
Theobald.
William the Conqueror. We have linked you to William the Conqueror,
Really?
King of England. There you go.
There you
Well,
go.
I've always he's a bad.
I have no
He was
idea.
meaner than a gar, wasn't he? Didn't
I'm sure they all were
he?
back
Kill a
then.
lot of people.
They all did back then.
Richard Le Magnifique. Le Magnifique.
You got it.
Oh, I didn't finish Tank Lovett's story, did I?
Yeah, go for Tank.
I'm sorry.
I like that name, Tank.
Well, I said, Granddad, how in the world did you do that? You know.
Going from Olive to Birmingham.
Yeah, and of course he was a little bit tougher than I am. You know. He said, well, we had to stop and rest.
Well, how
But
far do
that
you
was
think?
probably a normal day's work.
What is it? About 4 or 5 miles from Olive to Fair Dealing.
Yeah, and then
How far is it?
and
from
it's
there?
further from Fairdealing to Birmingham. I wouldn't doubt it wouldn't be 8 or 9 miles. And I don't know that's you turn at Fairdealing left Barge Island Road.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was a road or if there was another road that ran along the Tennessee River, followed the river, that would have taken you that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But me and you could. Well, you could. Y'all could, but I couldn't carry.
We've carried
I
a
couldn't
cooler,
walk that
son.
far. Yeah, I couldn't walk that far. About as tough as I am is what we did at Crowpatrick, and that's about the
Yeah.
maximum toughness for me.
And
that I've
me
got.
too.
We climbed, me and Chase and my daughter, we climbed Crowpatrick, and I petered out at the shoulder, and they went ahead and went to the peak.
Yeah, we summited Benny 3/4 or more. It's pretty good.
I made well for my everybody I talked to going up was younger than me.
Absolutely.
So I felt I was kind of
For sure.
pooched out there a little bit.
Well, you are the spawn of the Conqueror,
Oh yeah, yeah.
so that's not surprising.
Then there's another funny. Daddy told me this. Him and Granddad was cutting wood, and I'm throwing in some stuff that I figured a lot of people's interested in, and a lot of people's not. But they could cut wood faster back when you cross cut and split it. If you cut big trees and split it, you can split wood faster than you can saw it.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
you know. So they'd cut pretty good sized trees, and my granddad knew that there was plenty of trees. So if you cut a tree with a fork in it, it split good. So that's what they went after, you know. So they'd have a pretty good sized log on the ground and keep your saw from pinching up. You want to block it up. So they'd cut them a long pole, and it usually took two of them, and they'd get them a fulcrum out there, and they'd get it raised up, and then one of them would turn loose and go put a block of wood under it where they could saw. Well, they had one boy that was about to kill them. and Daddy and Granddad, Daddy was a little bit bigger than I am. Granddad was about my size. And they wrestled one, and you've all prized something and got your prize pole on the ground, and you just can't hardly hold it.
Yeah.
It's you know.
Yeah.
And so Daddy turned loose to get the block of wood, and Granddad slipped slipped off of it, and it caught his britches leg and picked him up. And he was swinging back and forth off of with his britches leg, head down. And so they both got so tickled they couldn't even do nothing for a while. But Daddy had to get a hold of Grandad and bear hug him and pull
Pick him
him
up.
down enough. And he said it took him a while to get him down enough he could get his britches leg hung off the tree. You know. And that's good. Daddy would just get tickled telling that. And it was a good story for him. Then there was a story about a guy named Black John. Two of Granny's grandmothers were Goheen. Most people here now call it Goheen. The people at Olive call that group Gaheen. Mm-hmm. And so I've looked back into it, and I hear it's Scottish, and over there, overseas, it's called Gaheen instead of Goheen. But that's beside the point. But they had one of Granny's grandmothers had a slave named Black John, or John, no last name, so they just called him Black John. And and he lived to be pretty old, and the husband died, and so he lived there with Elizabeth and helped her, and they were family, you know. Everybody always said that Black John was family. You know, they loved him, and he loved them, and they all took care of each other. And he was still alive when Grandad and Granny married, and Elizabeth Gaheen had died. So he lived on the place there with Granny's family, and he lived in a shack somewhere. And so when my granddad went to work for his in-laws as a hired hand, he lived with Black John. They were equal. They were hands, you know, and there was no racial, you know. They were real good friends. And Black John played harmonica, and he played fiddle, and he taught Granddad how to play harmonica and fiddle. And sometime, evidently he was young enough to kind of still be spunky. He found a woman at Rough Creek.
Fair dealing,
Rough Creek. And he wanted to go up there and either marry her or live with her or whatever. So he ended up moved to Rough Creek up there and died up in there, I reckon. And I've never seen a gravestone for him, but there's lots of graves, most black and white. Most people couldn't afford gravestones.
Yeah.
So, but I always heard about Black John and how much they cared about him and how much he cared about them. And I thought that was good in all the stuff that you hear nowadays concerning that type of stuff.
Yeah.
That there was good relationships and they cared about each other,
Yeah.
you know, back then.
That part doesn't get talked about.
No. No. And there's one more story, and I'd like to sing this. You know, kids didn't have toys and stuff, and big families, so Daddy's older brothers found an old buggy that was shot, and it had good axles and good wheels, and so they took the axles out of it, and they got a real long oak 2x12. Daddy said it was long, and so I'm guessing it to be 16, 20 foot long, and they mounted an axle on close to the back and fixed it where it wouldn't move, and then they bolted a buggy axle on the front where it would turn, and they put ropes on it. and they'd get, you know, Dad said, he said you could probably get 12 people on it. Well, every Sunday evening, all the kids at Olive would come to Granddad's, and they'd pull that thing up the hill to, you know, where the Frizzels live. Mm-hmm. Up on top of that hill, and they'd turn her around or ride her down that hill, you know. And he said sometimes they'd get away from them and turn over, and sometimes they'd run it off in the creek down there, but they called it the hoodlum hack.
the hoodlum hack.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, everybody around Olive that was Daddy's age would talk about going to Mr. Wells and riding that hoodlum hack. And that's, as soon as I get home, I'll think of another one, but that's all the Grandad stories I can think
Well,
of.
you can make another list and come back on again and tell another list if you want to.
But he was people at Olive, he didn't talk loud. He had this same voice. You know how I lose my voice and get there's something about my vocal cords. Well, all of Daddy's brothers and sisters was that way, and Granddad was that way, and Granny was that way. So he kind of mumbled around, and they called him Mumbling Will. Not to his face.
On the hoodlum hack.
But he worked hard and never did. You know, they had 8 kids and raised 7 to be grown, and they had 8 acres of land, rented ground, and all your profits give to the landowner, you know.
Yeah.
And they just was poor and very, very honest and hardworking. And
When I say they weren't I'm going to say everybody around there was at that time.
yeah. But you know what? They didn't. It didn't seem to bother them. I was thinking about this yesterday. You know how I get too deep sometimes with some stuff. But and I don't mean to get into religion and stuff, but my definition of greed is wanting more than God's already given you. He knows what I need, and He's going to provide it for me. And if you get to wanting more than He's given you, I call that greed, and I'm the king of it. They seem to be perfectly satisfied with what they had.
Content.
Yeah. And I'm not that way. You know, I'll never quit. I'll never get as much as I want.
I'll say
I'm
this.
that way, and so I say I'm greedy.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I think, speaking of them, they probably, in their whole life, probably didn't go 20 miles away from where they were born. Would you say?
Well,
They didn't go 100 miles for sure.
yeah, Uncle Bob lived in Henderson, the one with the one hand, and I remember them going up there sometimes.
I'm saying we drive.
Yeah.
To Paducah. We
They
drive.
didn't go. They didn't go many places.
We drive to Gulf Shores. We drive to Chicago, California. We fly places.
Yeah.
We have a phone that you can look and see what everybody has now, everybody else in the world, and they didn't have that. They could see maybe over the holler. They knew what the community had, but they weren't bombarded with what everybody else has, like we are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it might not have been as easy. I don't know. I didn't live back then, but it might have been easier to be content with what you had back then if everybody else had that too.
Yeah. And you know how, Chase, the more you get, the more you want,
Well, I've always said about
don't you?
not wanting what your neighbor has,
Yeah.
and because you don't know what it took for your neighbor to get that and what they went through to get that, and you don't know if you can handle what they have.
Yeah.
So if your neighbor has this, or you see a mansion or whatever it is, and you want it, you don't know if you can handle it. And what if, probably many times it's been, God might say, oh, I'll hand you this. You want it so bad, and then it falls right, and it doesn't work out. You can't handle it. I think that commandment is for our safety.
Yeah. Yeah. Granddad.
To be content.
Yeah. I'll have to say that one time, Daddy said that they got so poor that they got embarrassed about their clothes. And so they quit going in public. They quit going to church, quit going out in public. And so and one of his brothers quit school. He was in high school, and he quit school because he was too embarrassed about his clothes. So I put a little bit together there that in 1930 there was a big drought here. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't make a crop,
There wasn't no crop insurance then.
if you didn't make a crop, you depended on your crop to buy your next year's clothes. And so that's probably when that happened.
Yeah.
But Daddy said, he said it was just ragged and it was embarrassing. And he said, he said my family, was very devout Methodist. Went to church every time the door was open. Every meal eaten in that house, you had the blessing, And he said, even with that kind of background on our beliefs, he said, we were too embarrassed to go to church or anywhere else. And Dad rode a mule from Olive to Hardin to high school the first 2 years, and then he got a job at Olive at a sawmill and made enough money to buy a car. And then his last 2 years he drove a car, but he was not too good, or whatever you'd want to say, to ride a mule. And that's a pretty good little trip.
Jesus rode.
Yeah.
From Hardin to
Jesus
Olive.
rode a jackass into Jerusalem. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was rough times back then. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it would be good if we knew how to survive in those times. We don't know what the future is going to bring. It may get rough again, and there's going to be a lot of people who's not emotionally able to handle having less.
Yeah.
And I might be one of them. I don't know.
Or even emotionally ready to hold the lantern.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people now who don't know how to make it with less.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been lucky, blessed, or whatever, that I've had interests in old ways, so I've learned I can make it building a fire and cooking on it and sleeping outside, and but a lot of people can't. But like we said, coming over here when I was a kid, everybody had a garden. People in town and people out in the country, and everybody canned and put up enough food for the winter. And now at my house, if something happened, I might get by a week.
Yeah.
I might get by a week with what I've got. But
Yeah.
back when I was a kid, you could survive a catastrophe of some kind for months.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't now.
Well,
A couple of weeks, we'd be killing each other.
Yeah.
We'd be.
I mean, the ice storm and the tornado, I mean, some people.
Yeah, I'd be starving, cold, and I need some food. I can't let you have it. Well, I'd probably shoot you, and you wouldn't me.
it doesn't take
It could get that. It could get that way pretty quick.
it doesn't take long for people to turn tribal.
And we've also
Right.
talked about how in
Right.
times like that, people share, and like the good and the bad come out. I reckon.
Oh yeah, that's when it happens. But
I hope we don't see that again.
we're not tough enough to make it. It wouldn't be easy.
It'd be a learning curve, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Some people probably got more bullets than they got food stored up. You can't eat the bullets, but probably good to have both, but you can't eat one.
Yeah, I guarantee you, I'm not a gun guy. I don't have a bunch of guns and stuff like that, but I guarantee you I got enough bullets. We got more bullets than I do cans of food.
Yeah.
Don't you, Chase?
I know I do.
I think probably I do too.
Yeah. And I'm not even I love guns and old guns and stuff, but I'm not what you call a gun enthusiast.
Right.
So think of those people that's probably got half of this room size full of ammo.
Yeah.
Well, they had it different back then. There was just a different culture and a different way of life and different country. That's for sure.
And that's what the attitudes they had is what made the country great. I've been watching a little bit about George Washington. I can't think what channel it is. It might be a history channel, but they've been having a thing about George Washington, and y'all probably seen that. In the Revolutionary War, and it makes you do a lot of thinking, and it tells you a lot about how the founding fathers thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a constitutionalist, a conservative, constitutional conservative. I don't belong to a party, but that's my beliefs, So I've got a copy of the Constitution, and I enjoy studying it and trying to figure out what it means for us now, and then and the genius that the founding fathers had in coming up with all that.
Every word meant something. Every word was put on the paper for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, and how they.
Kind of think they're smarter than the ones we got in Washington right now.
Yeah. And then, you know, if you think it out and you see shows like this George Washington show that's, I'm sure there's some conversation that's fiction, but it's teaching you how people thought back then and what their thoughts were.
Yeah.
And so you see why they came up with that document.
Yeah.
And they were, so many of them were so torn about, many of the founding fathers had slaves. And they had conflict in their mind. But they did know, I'll just put it this way probably, they did know that to get to this point where everybody was free, it had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And they had to get it started, and then hoping eventually it would give freedom to all Americans.
Let me ask you this. It's kind of a fun question. If you could pick one period in history or one person, if you could go back while they were alive, get a time machine and go back, what would it be? A person or a time in history? Where would you go back to?
I don't know. I've never really thought about that.
I mean, if you could jump in a time machine tonight and you had one time in history to go back and see it or meet somebody.
Well, it would probably be Civil War era, and you'd probably want to talk to Lincoln, and you'd probably want to talk to Davis, and I probably would want to talk to Forrest, General Forrest. And I did come up with another story.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I thought I had it written down. These are funny things. My granddaddy had an uncle named Fielding Watkins, and I guess it's spelled F-E-A-L-D-I-N-E, I guess. And they called him Uncle Fielding. And he's the one that married my great-granddaddy's widow.
Uh-huh.
And he was not very intelligent, and he just didn't think. And he was spontaneous, not very intelligent, scared to death of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And him and Granddad hauled a load of corn to Hardin and loaded it in a boxcar. And Granddad was in the wagon, and he'd throw a shovel full in the door, and Uncle Fielding would scoop it up and throw it in the back of the car. And so Granddad, he would stick his head around just as Granddad would throw the shovel, and he'd say, Uncle Phelan, you got to watch me, and we got to time this. You don't stick your head around the corner, you hear the corn hit.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't pay no attention to him. So Granddad got him across the forehead with that scoop shovel. You know? And it didn't bleed at the moment, and they headed back to Olive, and they got down to the Nemo Bridge there on Clark's River, close to Bubba's.
Uh-huh.
Back in that field, the old road.
Yeah.
And so they's going to water the mules and get a drink of water, and Uncle Phelan got down over the water, and a drop of blood dripped in it, and he looked in the reflection and saw the gas and just got to screaming and crying and took off running to Hardin, and Granddad couldn't get him to stop. He just went crazy. You know? And so he had to turn the wagon around and run him down, make him get in the wagon, take him to the doctor, you know.
Fire up the holler hack and go get him.
Get that lantern lit up.
That lantern lit up.
And he was so scared of everything. They shocked corn and hay a lot. Then you know what I'm talking about, a shock. They put a pole in the ground, and they'd cut the whole corn stalk down. And stack them up around it, kind of like a Christmas tree, you know, and then the water would run off, and they'd do hay that way. So they had corn shocked. And so Uncle Fielding would go out there and break off some corn to feed the hogs. Well, Granddad and Uncle Jim would get up in there and hide. So he'd be getting him, and they'd jump out and grab him and said he'd just about pass out. He'd get down, scare him so bad he'd get down. And he was in the house one night, and they lived in an old house, concrete block. Old log house, and they'd put rocks in the corners, and it might be 3 foot tall under the house. And he heard something and got all scared, got his gun, went out there, and they heard it shoot. And he come back and asked, he said, well, if it's anything out there, he said, I got it. I said, well, we just heard you shoot once. And he said, well, he said, I aimed over this corner and I pulled the trigger and slung it across there real quick. He said, I shot all under that.
Just the spray.
He loved snow. And they didn't watch the weather report.
Yeah.
And they could, they got to looking snowy. And he talked about, oh, I hope it snows, and I hope it snows, and I hope it snows. And that's cutting the fence rails. And I've been cutting them all day. So he said, boy, if it snows, he said, I'm just going to get up in the morning and run, jump out in that snow. And so they went to bed, and Grandad and Uncle Jim got up and got them rails and stacked them up on the porch to the ceiling. Uncle Phil got up, lit his lantern, and went to the door. He said, oh, it snowed to the roof. Said, watch me jump in there. His wife's name was Cynthia, and they called her Cynthia.
Uh-huh.
Watch me jump in there, Cynthia. And he tore out running and run into them rails and like killed him. And then him and Grandad was cutting rails. They're going to cut rails, so they cut a bunch of poles. And then you'd stack them up, and then when you got all your poles cut, you'd split your rails. So they's packing them poles out of the woods. And he said they'd get them up, put them on the shoulder, and it's just all you could do. Because Grandad wasn't a big man, It's just all you could do to get out of the woods with them poles. So he was in the front, and Uncle Phelan was in the back. And they got out there to the pile, and, that you need to coordinate that, and turn, count 3 and throw it. So when they got to the pile, Uncle Phelan just threw his off. That's all he could carry, and he said, Lord, he said, he couldn't even get in the wagon. Uncle Phelan had to get him up and get him in the wagon. He said he's down for several days over there.
Well, you come from a long line of tricksters, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't take after him. I don't like to mess with people.
Well, thank you for the stories, Benny.
Yeah, I'm just
Forever captured.
tickled to get to do it because I had a lot of relatives wanted these stories, and so
Yeah,
they can get them.
I'm glad it's on record now.
So when it's available,
We'll let
I'll
you know.
text.
Yeah.
I'll text. I haven't got many cousins left, but
We want the whole world to watch.
what few there is, I'll text them, and I think they'll really enjoy it.
Well, I'm happy for that.
We'll
I
add
appreciate-
that to the stories of the Benton movie theater
I appreciate it.
when some kids were doing tricks.
Yeah.
What about you, Cole? Where would you go in history,
I would
or a person you'd like to talk to?
want to be Nikola Tesla's cat.
Oh,
Just like laying on the mantle when Edison and his boys kicked in the door and stole all his stuff.
that's a good one. I never thought about that.
But also be there for the experiments and to watch it. I want to be a fly on the wall for stuff like that.
Absolutely, that's a good one.
Get a taste of how those pyramids were built until
Yeah.
Edison had to shut it down for a bulb.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you know what? All of us, I know y'all, well, we'd love to talk to Jesus.
Oh yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah, we would.
yeah,
And we will.
yeah.
So, we're
Yeah, that's probably.
going to talk to him.
Yeah.
I would. I think that's on everybody's list. Is Jesus?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to go back either to Gettysburg and just sit on a hill and watch that go down, or probably World War II, Normandy, something.
Yeah. Well, I've done 2 Gettysburg reenactments, and there was times in those reenactments that you felt like you was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the real one. It's pretty awesome.
I'd probably go back to however long it was, and Mr. Schwinn himself when he made his first factory, and I'd say, maybe don't.
Don't do it.
Little bicycle factory.
Oh, You did see Biden fall over on the bicycle, didn't you, Benny?
I didn't see it originally, but I've seen it on a lot of Fox likes to show that.
I go back a few weeks and I
seen
talk
that,
to the day planner and say maybe change the plans.
Yeah, ought to be.
know,
Let's do brunch in today.
I know how that feels. You know, I felt that way when that ladder turned over at my house the other day, and I was on it, so I know the feeling.
Yeah.
But nobody saw it.
You have-
Millions of people saw it.
Yeah.
The
The
bicycle
whole world
wreck.
saw that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Bless his heart.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah, that was hard to watch.
Well, I'm not happy with him right now, but they shouldn't have put him on a bicycle.
Man,
Whoever's in
gas
charge.
is down.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
$3.99.
Hey, well, I feel good about
It's
everything.
low now.
Who
Don't
put
you
him
feel
on-
good about everything?
What we've done here tonight, or just everything in the world?
Oh, everything's good in this room right now.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the world, but you constantly remind me of this. You've got it permanent, that all things work for the good of those who love the Lord. And so we got to keep focused on that.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
we'll make it till tomorrow, and we know that whatever it is, we're going to be good.
Keep, live, laugh, loving.
That's right. That's right. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Just
Henry?
A message for
appreciate to get to do it.
a message for the future generations that listen.
Well, yeah, maybe some good advice.
Let's hear it.
We could use that.
Don't fry bacon with your shirt off.
Okay.
Amen.
Perfect. I got nothing to add to that.
You got nothing?
I got nothing. It's
Yeah.
perfect.
Thank you, Benny Watkins. We'll have you on again. You can come up with some more stories.
Oh, you know me, I'm not. I'm out. You know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on again.
Yeah.
We appreciate
Thank
you.
y'all. Thank y'all.
We love you,
I love y'all.
and we're gonna sign out tonight. So live wild, live life wild and free, and keep on keeping on. Put your nose into the storm and push through. Life chaser out. Thank you, Benny.
We'll get Carly on to talk about her world travels.
Yeah.
She can confirm stories.
Could you imagine get me and her?
That would be a good one.
She'd get mad. We'd get to arguing.